first something I've been teaching around the world for 22 years, but the body is an amazing thing. And if we can bring the right approaches to understanding it and almost answering the questions of why is the body breaking down, why is it dysfunctional, we can address the root cause behind most of the dysfunctions and the difficulties we see in the body. So BeActivated becomes a system of understanding the body, and it's a way of thinking about the body to look at the root cause behind everything that we see. So if we can understand what the body is attempting to do in order to keep us safe. And so as we were doing in our discussion today, the body has two priorities. And so if the body prioritizes breathing and moving, and what it's willing to do in that is to sacrifice pretty much anything. And when we understand that as a background philosophy in why we see the different dysfunctions in the body, we can start to address those things, and we start in understanding the patterns of the body, what we call the 1, 2, 3, how the body breaks down. We're looking in a physiological realm of the autonomic nervous system, which is basically the stress response and the relaxation response. And what we've found is that there's almost a whole area of the relaxation response the body doesn't have access to anymore. And as we start to address the survival priorities through breathing, through what we call zone 1, so zone 1 is the hip flexors and the glutes, we start expanding the body, and then suddenly we have things that influence strength and power and flexibility, endurance, speed, balance, coordination. But we start getting people feeling different, moving different, and being different in the world. And so it's been a very interesting journey in 22 years, because when I first started, it was as a physiotherapist with an idea, teaching, sharing. And the wonderful thing about sharing things in the world is people ask questions and we have to rethink the work, and it's slowly progressed into a system where we're in sports performance, we're in rehab, we're in neurological things, and so what we find is, we can be working with a spinal cord injury with the same principles as we would with an elite sportsman or woman. And although the principles are the same, the application and the way we communicate it is different. But ultimately what we're looking for is an optimal state in the body so that it can perform at its best level. And where this gets interesting is if every pattern that we're seeing in dysfunction is related to a survival state, therefore the body is living in a state of being unsafe. And as we build safety into the body through sort of integrity in the nervous system, suddenly the performance comes. And for our athlete, that's the highest level of performance they can achieve. For somebody else, it may be the ability to get up and walk across the room and go make a cup of tea. And so it all depends who are the people that we're working with. And where it's been really interesting is when we start to work with the physiology, we start to impact the mental and the emotional states as well. So we're dealing with stress responses and overcoming things, and suddenly we're in the world of resilience. And in a world that is a little mad and crazy and has been for quite a while, having resilience built into our system, having safety built into our system allows our athletes, our clients, whoever we're working with to perform in whatever environments they find themselves in. And I think the most important thing is that it's designed to be simple. It's designed to be that when you start to understand your patterns and we give you some tools, we are then able to we're then able to empower you to take care of yourself. And that's really the goal of BeActivated, is to help you understand where you're at, where you want to go to, and how to get there, and then give so much of that responsibility to you so that you can take care of yourself. And then it's almost like we become facilitators along the way, where when you're somewhere else in your journey and need help, we can help you get there too. So BeActivated is a weird thing because it's a philosophy and it's a practical application, and I've had sessions where we're talking into mindset and points of focus, and that's all we've done, and we've got tangible, measurable results in the physical state. And other times we're doing less talking and we're on the table and we're engaging into the diaphragm and the psoas, or maybe we've got to clear through the quad or the tibialis. And it all depends what our client brings and what is the problem that we're choosing to solve. So, it's always been one of those, what is it? It's a hard question to answer, but it's one where when we start to bring a different philosophy to the body and to life and to sport, we ask different questions, we get different answers, and most of the time we find a different way that serves ourselves, our bodies better. So most common compensation patterns means we kind of have to talk about what is a compensation pattern. So in the way we're looking at this, we've got a big compass over here, but there's a center star in the middle, and then it moves outwards over here. And so if our body is doing the job right, it actually moves from the center out. In our world, that's zone 1, so that's your diaphragm, your psoas, your hip flexor, and your glute. And if they are firing first, and if they are firing on demand, then the body expands out, and every structure is doing its own job the way it was designed. There's space to move, there's space to function. Now, that's our optimal state. In that place, it's almost like we are acting on the world. The energy moves out, if you like, and we're acting on the world around us. When we're in a survival state, fight, flight, and freeze, so something happens and this state that we're in isn't the one that's keeping us okay right now. Somewhere in a trauma, the body has chosen a survival strategy. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Because of the contract that we have with our bodies, the body says we need to breathe and we need to move in order to survive. And this is really like a foundational piece of understanding. If I've got to breathe and I've got to move, at no point did the body say, how well do you move? Does it hurt to move? I don't care. If you can move, you're alive, tick. And so it starts to look for the best way to survive. And so there are a whole series of compensations. Now, if we've got zone 1 in the middle, then on the outside is zone 2, and then the next one is zone 3. So if my hip flexor is my zone 1, then my zone 2 is my quad at the bottom and my abdominals at the top. So if we've got a zone 2 compensation, we've got 2 patterns there, and the first one, which we call a 2-2-3, that becomes the highest risk in that pattern from an injury and breakdown dysfunction level. So it's compensation to help you, but it's a compensation that when it breaks, we have non-contact cruciate tears. So the cruciate ligament will go, the medial collateral ligament will go, the medial meniscus will go, non-contact. And people always go, oh, it's unlucky. We don't believe it's unlucky. We believe it's physiologically triggered because you've got a compensation that puts your body at risk. And so that's the primary thing that comes up in a 2-2-3, because what it is the quad is trying to work up to be the hip, and it's trying to work down to look after the knee. And because the hip is the priority of movement, what happens at some point, it will sacrifice the knee because it's got to look after the hip. And so what happens in the front happens in the back. So the quad and the hamstring both prioritize upwards, and nobody's looking after the knee, which means all you have left are your, what we call the non-contractile structures. So they're not dynamic. So if I've put momentum and force on them, they either hold or they break. And usually it's a turning, a twisting. I know I was talking to one of the football physios today, and she was saying that in the ladies' football in Morocco, there's quite a lot of ACL injuries, and I was just talking about the different surfaces. When we're going from grass to synthetic, and all of those are different forces through the body. And if I overload a body, the body's going to have to always choose priorities, and it's always going to choose the hip, which in a 2-2-3, it's always going to choose to sacrifice the knee. And unfortunately, that's what we see. The other zone 2 pattern is actually what we call a 2-3-3. Now, this is a very sagittal plane pattern, so a very front-on pattern. The quads and the abdominals they're the hip flexors. Your hamstring and your rectus spinae in your back become your glutes. And this pattern works best in a straight line. It doesn't like going laterally, it doesn't like rotating, which basically, if I'm your opponent, those are the patterns I'm going to challenge you in. But from an injury breakdown perspective, we're seeing anterior knee pains, we're seeing quad strains, quad tears, hamstring strains, the groin strains, all the stuff in like pressure into the hips, inguinal hernias, abdominal hernias, from a pregnant mom side, because many of our athletes are women and are also moms. We start to see diastases, and a diastasis is because this has got to stay locked to do hip flexion. And so baby literally has to split mom's tummy in order to come out, and not come out that way, but create space to grow. And so what we're finding is that if we can resequence the body to the way that it's meant to be, that starts to reverse. And it's been kind of one of the most recent things where I'm like, my mind is blown, because we have ladies on our workshops often that go, me, yep, diastasis recti, and we're working and kind of by the end of day 2 they're going, it's just zipped up. And we have to go, what? But we know it's possible, but until it happens, we don't know. And so if the body's locked in that pattern, it's locked in the pattern, it can't let it go because it believes it's fighting for its life. But those injury profiles are always there. So when we do the 1, 2, 3 testing, I can almost give an athlete a list and say, which one of these have you had? And a lot of the time they're going, tick, 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 tick. And so the compensation is the thing that kept you going, but the compensation when it fatigues and breaks becomes your greatest risk. And so when your compensation breaks, it's harder to come back. And so there we've done zone 2, but if the body goes down to zone 3, and again, I know in the talk I got everyone to touch down by their shin and say, imagine that's your hip flexor. And there's a very intelligent room that we had today, and they're looking at me like, gosh, this guy's stupid. Yes, this can't be your hip flexor. But the body is that crazy and that beautiful that it'll still find a way. And it'll find a way to have your tibialis down here be your hip flexor, your calf then be your butt. And if you're listening to this and thinking, wow, what is this man on? This is crazy. But just imagine that this were a pattern that the body chose. That would have to lock up your ankle. So now, if your ankle is locked, it's got reduced range this way and no range that way, well, that's going to be the highest area of risk. So we're seeing plantar fasciitis, we're seeing chronic ankle injuries, Achilles tears, all of those things happen down there, and a whole lot of dysfunction in the feet. But where it gets interesting is the body, we look at the body as a whole, so we'll have those patterns, but we also end up with an unstable shoulder on the other side. And so the strangest thing is if I've got an unstable shoulder, I'm probably a 3-3-3 leg, is what we call it, on the other side. And if we can address that and help the nervous system come out of that, we'll stabilize the shoulder. And it's kind of like, okay, that's weird. Now, I've been doing this a long, long time, and it still sounds weird saying it, because why would I go and address the hips and the quads and the calf and the tibialis in order to make my shoulder stable? Well, the reason is the shoulder's unstable because the body's prioritizing all of this. And you may find, maybe you're an athlete listening to this, and you're going, I actually have an Achilles thing or a calf that always cramps. Why? I get shin splints. And when that is really bugging me, my shoulder hurts. Well, that's the two of them talking. The pattern's failing you. And all of these patterns, we can function at quite a high level until we can't. And then we can't come back from it. And so if we then go further, let's say the body's gone all the way down and that didn't work, then we start going up. And we ask our arm or our jaw to do hip flexion because that's our priority movement. And so suddenly if it's my arm, the arm says I have to shorten, tighten, drive down in order to do hip flexion. All of those structures in my feet and legs are driving up. All of this is driving down in order to do hip flexion, in order to help me move, in order to survive. And you go, but I want to play volleyball and I want to jump in the air and I want to hit the ball. And it says, I'm sorry, can't do that, because to do that would put the body at risk. So I can't let you do that. But so what happens is with that pattern, we're starting to get impingements into the shoulder, tennis elbows, all the repetitive strain injuries, hand and wrist dysfunctions. But because of these long levers driving through, we have discs that prolapse that way. They go out the other way. We have the sacrum starts to shift that way. We have the hip that moves out that way, because the body is trying to deal with these forces that are squeezing inwards, and it's trying to give space to almost so your body doesn't hurt so bad and allows it to move, but you're in dysfunction and pain. And so when as an athlete you're wondering why when my arm hurts my disc is also popping out, or my disc pops out and then my arm hurts, it's because you're probably a 3-3-3 arm. And again, the only reason this is happening is because the body is trying to find a way to move, and this is the strategy it's chosen to keep you going. And then we got too busy to realize this wasn't the right pattern for the longevity that we're looking for. So then we go up into the jaw. And so the jaw pattern is a lot like the arm one, long lever driving down, except we're now using the sternocleidomastoid, which is up here, the masseter, the temporalis. And so we're locking down and we're locking down. And so if I'm doing that, first and foremost, it's tough to be a communicator on the sports field when you're a jaw driver, because you actually need this to be tight in order for you to function and move. So we find that what happens with the jaw is the jaw has to shorten and tighten, so we can get TMJ problems, we can get ear problems, but the neck muscles, the sternocleidomastoids over here, they're the most remarkable muscles in the world, and when they overwork and when they're unhappy, they have this magic list: dizziness, nausea, vomiting, ring in the ears, visual disturbances, migraines and headaches. This is all from a jaw driver. So as the system breaks, we start to have those things. So I know high elite athletes who've ended up with their careers gone because of migraines and headaches that they couldn't overcome, because you can't go and compete when you can barely see because of blinding headaches. And my question is always, what if we could find the root cause? What if we could bring safety back to the body and allow those patterns to let go? And in all of the time of doing this, that is certainly what we've seen is possible. Now, it's not always easy, but it certainly is possible when we invite the body back to a place of safety. Now, there is a final pattern, and that's the pattern that we call a zero, and that's when the body doesn't find an effective strategy. And this is when the body looks overwhelmed, the athlete looks overwhelmed, the situation just got too much, and all of their learning, all of their experience just seems to magically vanish. The body just doesn't work, and it's kind of like the decision making just vanished in that moment. And sometimes you see it in those pressure situations on the tennis court. Someone's like beating their hero and they're about to win, and they suddenly think about it. And they're like, I'm about to beat my hero. Now, I'm not going to use names because there are tons of those games that you can watch in any sport. And then suddenly they start thinking about it, and you literally see their system glaze over. And it's like the system chooses an overwhelmed disconnect, and then suddenly they can't hit the ball. They're like, oh, it's heavy. And I'm a surfer, and I've had that feeling in the ocean. I went out in very big waves, and they said it was going to happen. And I went for an hour and a half, having the time of my life. I got biggest wipeouts of my life, but this is what it was meant to be. And then at some point, I felt that zero kick in, where my system got fatigued and overwhelmed. Now, in that place, it's like you get this heaviness, this clumsiness in our thinking, in our moving. The problem is some athletes, when they get stuck in that, they don't come out. So they can't get back on the field. They're almost not injured, but they just have no energy. And what we see in the world is, like with the zeros, we always put is the exhaustion, fatigue, yuppie flus, but post-traumatic stress. And When I've done a lot of work over the years where military and police physios from around the world have come on programs and doctors, and when they go back, they test people. And they always come back and they go, that's really strange. Everyone who has a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress is a 0. And I kind of want to go, yep, that's how it works. And so a 0 is when you can't find an effective response to the world around you. So the body would rather just take your energy away. I don't have the energy to train. I don't have the motivation. And if you are like we see athletes that are like a 5 out of 10. They've got some function, but once they hit their point of fatigue, they can't come back from it. And those ones are tough because that's when they get injured. And I mentioned it today in the talk that when my son was 10 years old, we had a South African rugby player that I normally don't phone up and say we need to see that human being because they're at risk. And there was this big human being, and my son was 10 years old, and a 10-year-old can push a 130 kilogram man around the room if he's a 0, and he was a 0. And it is a scary sight to see, but unless you test it, you don't know, and that's what we were testing. And so we were more worried that if you're a rugby player and that's the state you're in, you're at a high risk of something going really, really wrong on the field. And he was playing for the Springboks, and things weren't looking right, and we don't want that. And so when we understand the patterns, then we can start to say, is this something? Because sometimes people go, but my pattern works, look how good I am. And I'm like, awesome. So we can help you be better at your pattern. We would choose not to, but we can help you be better at your pattern. So we can help you be faster, stronger, all of those things in your pattern. But ideally, we would want to get the body into a 1, 2, 3, where we're taking all the advantages that you've got as your skill set, and then we build a resilience on top, and we build a longevity and an endurance. And so I always want to be in a position where my system is able to recover quicker, my system can go longer. Even in what I do, I travel the world. Sometimes there's a ridiculous amount of travel, and I'm up, and the next day I'm teaching somewhere, and we go long, and I've got to manage my energy system. I've got to manage so that I can every day get up and perform at the best level, because nobody wants me if I'm having a bad day, so I'm just going to be a 2 out of 10 today if you don't mind. That's not cool. But in sports and professional sport, you actually can't afford a 2 out of 10 day. That's the day you lose. That's the day you sent off the team. Somebody else gets selected instead of you. But the thing about these compensation patterns is the harder we push them, the sooner they break. And they will break, and sometimes that breaking is irreparable, which is when we see athletes' careers cut very, very short, and other times they limp through it, where the injury, an ankle injury. So let's say, and I know when I studied, ankle injury, it's chronic, you're going to keep having it. And that's just how it was. So once you've done it once, and we don't agree. What we know is that if you are a 3-3-3 leg and you keep going over in your ankle, we need to stop you being a 3-3-3 leg so that you have more resilience through those structures so that doesn't happen. And so I think we want to optimize the system so that they can perform at the highest level and be safe enough to continue for longer at that high level. So, how does BeActivated impact on sports performance? Well, first and foremost, we have to kind of understand the body. And if we go to the idea that the body works on the principle of breathing and moving as priorities, and it's actually willing to sacrifice anything. And so, about pretty much 20 years ago, when working with my clients and trying to explain some concepts to them, and these were athletes, I started talking about, well, it's like this is zone 1, and this is zone 2, and this is zone 3, and this is what your body's meant to do. And every single one of them went, oh, that makes sense. And I was like, wow, that actually does make sense. I think I need to figure this out. And when I was figuring it out, It was interesting because I was finding patterns of how the body was collapsing, but the collapsing was a survival response, but yet even my really top athletes were still doing this at some level. And so particularly when I was being invited to work with like the top athletes, I truly believed that they would not need me because they don't have compensations, they don't have breakdowns, but they do, and they just adapt to them better than probably the rest of us. But what happens is our compensations and adaptations are actually impacting on our strength, our flexibility, our power, endurance, speed, balance, coordination, but our ability to perform at the highest level that we want to. And so when we can start to integrate the body, sequence the body, get things in the right order, then suddenly we're in a place where forces, instead of the body forces collapsing into each other and kind of fighting against each other, which is when we see reduced performance, breakdown, pain and dysfunction, all of the things that are in the realm of sport. But when we start to get the body doing things in the right order, suddenly we see a whole different thing happening. We see expanded systems that are stronger, more resilient, more flexible, more adaptable, more resilient. When we see someone fall down and get up as though nothing had happened, where somebody else falls down and doesn't get up. And so the putting it into sport becomes how do we get your body in the better position so you start moving better and feeling better. So we always talk about we create competence and then we want to move towards confidence. And the confidence is a feeling. It's a feeling where you start to believe in yourself, your system, trust your system to do more. And I think this has been the fun part of sports as well, because again, when I went into it, I didn't know any of this, and we were solving problems on the go. And when we start to see that when you're out of sequence, you're working harder, there's an additional energy cost, which means you're going to fatigue quicker. When you fatigue, then emotionally you're in a weaker state, which means if your opponent can outlast you just in fatigue, they're just a little fitter than you, they can just go a little longer, they can actually beat you. And so there are a whole lot of teams and sports where their strategy is to outlast you based purely on endurance. But if endurance is a physiological state that we can train, not just out doing strength and conditioning and harder work, but actually train the body in the sequence at which the body works so it's more effective, more efficient, and therefore the energy usage is better. You build the capacity of a system. An athlete with high capacity can just keep pitching up and playing. They don't have the crazy dips that we often see in our favorite teams when they're doing well and they're not doing well and they're doing well, and what is that about? But if we can get our athletes tuning into themselves, finding the things that empower them, and one of the things we always like to talk about with our athletes is remember that you have a strategy, because if your coaches and your doctors and your therapists, they're on the side of the field and you're on the field and there's nothing that they can do, we want you to know that you have strategies on the field. Maybe it would be to stop and take a breath. Maybe it would be to shift your mindset in that moment, to change your physiology. We'd find things that are cues for you so that you can constantly reorientate yourself back to that best place you can be, so that you don't get caught up in the big moment, because a lot of the athletes who really achieve at high levels, when they get to the top, there's a huge amount of pressure, and those who succeed manage the pressure the best. But pressure again is a physiological thing, and so when the physiology collapses, and then everything collapses, then all those things, all those skills that you learned just seem to be gone. And so if we can train that into the system, which we can, and so what's so nice about it in sport is we're not here to substitute the strength and conditioning. What we want to do is we want to take the strength and conditioning and make it more effective. We want to, if you're working with your physio to rehab something, to overcome something, we want to understand the dysfunction. We want to get you back on the field, back on the track, wherever, in my world of surfing, back in the ocean as soon as possible. And so we do that by understanding the patterns of the body, helping the nervous system reset itself, and then train that in that optimal position, which would be what we call the 1, 2, 3. So we want to put it into movement, put it into all the skills that you're going to do on the field, and then from there, what we like is we overcoming the dysfunction into higher states of performance. And so if you can go out there, I know when we were doing our presentation earlier, I started with something about the Tour de France. The first athlete that I worked with was an Australian rider, and when he came back at the end of the first day that I'd worked with the team, he actually came and said, "I feel like I'm cheating." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, we were going up the hill, up the mountain in the Pyrenees, and I felt like I had a third lung." And I'm like, "I don't understand." He said, "I know what my body does, and at this point I'm gasping for air, it's hard work, and I have that last 5 kilometers or last 50% of the climb, I'm the one working the hardest. I was the one singing, I was the one having fun. Like somehow that activation of my diaphragm gave me like an extra lung." And so suddenly the way he perceived the race, what he was doing, completely changed. And that was exciting because that was his words, not my words. And he said something else that was interesting about sequence. He said he was pedaling in circles. And I'm like, "Well, dude, you normally pedal in circles." He said, "No, when his body's tired, he pedals in squares. He can feel the fighting of his system. And when he was pedaling in circles and a third lung, then he felt invincible." And he actually said that Lance Armstrong had a term that when his body was in perfect balance, that he was pedaling without a chain. So there was no resistance, the body was easy. Now what happens if that is a state that we should all be able to find? A place we should all be able to find and be in most of the things that we do. Maybe not all, but we believe that can be. And that's why I travel the world teaching this, because I want people to understand that, I want people to feel it. And sometimes when you hear it, you go, "Oh, that sounds nice, it's just another one of those things." But when you actually experience it in your own body, you're like, "How's this possible?" And I think for me, when an athlete starts getting to those places, then they really start to believe of the possibility and the potential that they have in them. And our goal is to help them be the best they can be to achieve whatever it is that they can achieve. You know, I'm thinking of a friend of mine in Taipei. His name's Denny. We do training in Taipei, and he was working, well, not working. He was watching a little soccer game, and young girls in a tournament, 11 years old, and his friend's daughter happened to get injured, and she was the star of the team. And the good physio did everything that they could to get her back. And about 4 hours later, she was basically going to be out the tournament. And he just asked if he could help. And his story is beautiful because this little girl absolutely loved what he was doing. And not only did she overcome her dysfunction, her pain, I think it was her knee, I can't be quite right, but she felt so good that she went and she played the next game, and she was the star of the next game, and she was man of the match, woman of the match, and they ended up winning the tournament. And it was her. It was she, and it went from a place of her injured, stuck, can't continue, to a place where not only could she come back, but she felt so excited about that she brought this amazing version of herself. And so it was awesome when my friend says, "I need to tell you a story." And I'm a storyteller. I love stories like that, because here is an 11-year-old, and this could be a 22-year-old, but here's an 11-year-old who believes that the pain that they're in is going to stop them doing what they want to do. And sometimes that's real, but sometimes when we resequence the body's cleverness, intelligence takes over. And you know, I never want us to be so clever that we actually think we know what's going on. But the body tells us if we do the work, and it says, "I like that, I don't like that." And so we do a lot of that with our athletes, testing and seeing what their body responds to and what it doesn't. So we do more of what works and less of what doesn't. But instead of just following this should work, no, let's test it. And so we're using, again, the strength and the power and the flexibility and the endurance to get feedback loops on, are we being successful or not? So from an athlete perspective, our athletes use this work themselves in a self-activation before they train. They will have their therapists that can support them, taking them deeper into the process. They're often activating afterwards, so they rest and recover quicker. And it's very exciting to see it. And you know, again, 22 years of teaching this around the world, there's quite a vast network of, and this work is in many places where you may not even know what someone's doing, but they're probably preparing their nervous system maybe to beat you if it's your opponent. And you know, years ago, a friend of mine, Chris, was doing work in Chicago with his high school team and doing this work. And his high school team was basically winning everything. And eventually, and this is what I love about kids, so these are high school boys, 17, 18 years old, and these kids asked the coach if he was willing to activate their opponents because they were winning too easily. And so literally, Chris ended up activating all of the kids in all the competitions at all the other schools, so that his kids could still win but feel like it was a fair fight. And I was like, wow, that's cool. That again, stories, crazy, but it's if your body is in an optimal place, if your car is well balanced and everything's done right, it works well. When it's not, when it's off balance, when one tire is a little bit low, everything starts to go off, and our body is exactly the same. So when we can find ways to optimize the system, which actually is a lot easier than we actually believe it is, then our body says, thank you so much, what would you like to do next? So the compensation will always break. And you know, when I first started working with high-level athletes, quite honestly, I was afraid that I would test people and they would all be 1, 2, 3s. You know, you're one of the best in the world. You must be okay. But what was interesting is every single one I tested all had a compensation. And most of them, they didn't have the language to describe it, but they all knew what it was. They all knew that they did something there, and it would be, my coach asks me not to do this, but I can't not do it. And so then we have to have the conversation about, this has got you so far, what do you want to do with it? And it's a choice, because it is always a choice. You can't say to someone, yeah, you've got the silly pattern that's bad for you, it's wrong, we must make you do that. We must always give people choice. You know, this is what you're doing, this is the risk that comes with it, this is the other option, but you can still choose. And it's interesting because I had a South African cricketer who broke his fingers 5 times in 2 years, which is really bad for your cricket career. But what happened was he was an arm driver, so an arm driver. But for my arm to drive my opposite hip, it has to shorten and tighten. Now how do you break fingers in cricket with a 3-3-3 arm? Well, first of all, he'd had a tennis elbow that they couldn't fix. And so he had surgery. And what happened is, now this area wasn't effectively cheating, and it just migrated lower down. And this is just our interpretation of it. But so now he's locking more in his wrist and his fingers. So 3 times that he broke, 2 times. Two of the times that he broke his fingers was catching the ball. And if you've ever tried the crazy thing of catching a ball with really rigid fingers, and a cricket ball is hard, you will know that your finger's going to break. So you have to have soft hands. But if your hand has to be tight to support your whole body, then this is going to be rigid, you're in trouble. And the other 3 times was batting. So again, if I'm here, and he was a left-handed batsman, if I'm here and my arm moves first and this is all tight, when the ball hits my gloves, if my hand was quite relaxed, it would hurt, it would bruise, it wouldn't break. But if my hand has to lock because it's keeping my whole body up and driving my whole body, now it's rigid. And if you just did an experiment, if you're watching this, and you just relaxed your fingers and you hit them like this, you go, okay, there you go. But if I make them tight and I do that, you can hear the forces through the hand change completely. What happens if your hand had no choice but to do that? Because that is how it moves and keeps your body safe, but it puts you at risk. So 2 years, 5 times breaking fingers. Now that's a massive impact on your career, and this is a top cricketer, and so the pattern has a consequence. And so we can take the sport, or we can look at the knee injury profiles, or this, I've watched fighters. I've watched fighters strike someone, and next minute a disc pops out. And so the way the forces are moving through the body, instead of expanding, they're collapsing. And in that moment that you strike, it all comes back at you. The most interesting thing in boxing is the most common fighting injury is a biceps tendon tear. And a biceps tendon tear means you're not using your sequence. You can't be, because if you were going from and striking from glutes through the body, then your arm should take no force back through it. But if I'm in an arm driving pattern, 50% at least of the force of my strike comes back at me. And so where do we feel it? Through the biceps tendon, because of its attachment. So it's not a surprise that in boxing it's the most common fighting injury. And so when we start to look at the athletes, their profiles, the risks, we can start to say, oh, no, that's just unlucky that this is what happens. I'm not sure that it is. And in all of these patterns, and there's risk. And one of the most important areas and controversial areas is concussions. And in collision sports, contact sports, if the body is put in a position where the compensation is unable to take care of the body, then it's at risk, and it takes the smallest amount of force to create a concussion in those situations. So if I'm an arm driver and my arm is down or my fist is tight, my integrity of my head would be absolutely fine. So if you and I bumped heads, no issue. But if I'm an arm driver, and for some reason I've got to have my arm up here, it can't protect anything through my chain, it can't look after me. But when you do something to my head now, I've got no protection. So now I'm at a higher risk of a concussion. Not that I'm guaranteed one, but I'm at a higher risk. If I'm down there is a 3-3-3 leg, and I'm put in a compromised position in my foot, which is very easy to do, and then I give you a tap on your head, I can give you a concussion. And so the very same thing then becomes, how do we help the body come out of that? How do we put safety back into the body so that it can start to almost integrate those patterns? And what we've found with the people that we work with concussions is we start with zone 1. And when zone 1 starts to kick in, the body seems to reintegrate itself. So again, we're building safety into the system. And so instead of changing the rules of games, and we still want to manage player safety in whatever we're doing, but can't we make the body safe? Can't we build safety in there? And then they can go out and they can perform at the high level, knowing that the resilience in the system is there to take care of them most of the time. So the simple answer here is the body works on an amazing principle. When you do the right thing, it responds immediately. So I always remember at university, in physiology, there's simple things. Here's a muscle with a nerve. And if you take the nerve away from the muscle dies. So why are we training muscles? Not sure. But what we need to do is we need to train nerves, and we need to get the nerves firing in an electrical pattern that serves the body at the highest level. The great thing about the body is through different reflexes, through different ways of working with the body, when you're able to almost show the brain, show the body what's happening, it shifts immediately. And I think this is what's been why I get so excited by this work. So we measure something, maybe it's flexibility, then we do something with a specific intent, and then we remeasure. And so we want to know, and it can, and we can do a strength test, we can do an endurance test, we can, and all of these different components are there that we have a feedback loop, and so the nervous system is telling us how well it's working in these different patterns. And so when we address the body into the reflexes, into the different patterns, if the body likes what we do, it shifts immediately. And as I said, I'm a storyteller, and in 2008 I was launching something at the South African Open of golf, and it was a golf DVD, and this is a long time ago, and something called a butt bungee. And I was doing a demonstration, and there was this little old lady, Irish lady, and we're doing a rotational strength test. And she'd volunteered, 60 people watching, and so I'm testing her, and she's not very strong, but we talk about her game of golf, so it's about golf. And so we do an activation on her, and then literally she becomes immovable. I am doing everything I can, and I can't move her. And at the back in the audience is this very big guy, and I just hear this, and he was saying bad words. Basically, he was saying, "I don't believe you." And I love that stuff. It's my favorite part. So I'm like, "I'm sorry, sir, can I help you?" No, he's like, no, come on up. Maybe I'm a con artist. Maybe I'm this. So he comes up. He's probably about 6'6". She's probably about 5'4". And so he's now got to do the test on her. And so he stands there thinking, this little old lady, I've got to be so careful. And he pushes, and you can actually see the horror when she's like an immovable force. And it was the most beautiful thing, because one, it was impossible in his mind, and two, she was amazing. And how we know she's Irish is she goes, "Oh, come on, Sonny, is that all you got?" And so this huge man is now humiliated by this little lady, because he actually can't push her, because her system immediately said, "I know what to do." And it was amazing. And it's kind of things like that that make no sense, but actually they do when you understand it. If we talk that same rotational pattern, if I've got that rotational pattern and you don't, and we run into each other, I'm just going to run straight over you. There's no way you can do anything about it. You can be bigger than me. And because you don't have access to that. But the wonderful thing about the body is when we teach it, when we remind it what it can do, then it'll find those patterns really quickly. Our goal then is to find the patterns and to keep them in your system for longer, that they become your default, your pattern, how you do it. And then the next time we work, we want to go even further. But it is one of the most amazing things in the body is I don't think people realize how much potential they have access to, but like now, not in 5 months' time, 6 months' time, okay, I'm going to work for 2 years in order to achieve this. And I think part of it is, like, I'm a child. I get bored easily, and so this has never got me bored because things happen all the time, and they blow my mind still today. And I've been doing this a long time, and it's so exciting watching someone go, how can I do that? How come my body's doing this when I couldn't 5 minutes ago? And it's like, because your body wants to. And so this is kind of what I was saying earlier about all the different areas that we're working. Spinal cord injuries. I never thought that I'd be doing stuff there, but I'm doing stuff there because we're taking the same patterns and the same activations, and we're applying it in a different way that's appropriate to those people, and we're finding physiological things are changing. So it doesn't mean that everybody gets up and walks, but if your greatest problem is your pain and your tone going wild and crazy, and that can be addressed through this, well, that's a big deal. If you can't sleep more than 2 hours a night and suddenly you can get 6 to 8 hours, that's a very big deal, because if you wake up exhausted every day, then your tone is going to be high. And simple things like bowel and bladder that we take for granted, if you have a spinal cord injury, that can be a life-threatening problem. And what we're finding is when we do the same principles in a way that's appropriate to those people, we're having a massive impact on it. And it's like, why can't we just understand that physiology is amazing, our bodies are incredible? Let's do more of this. Let's help people almost tap more into their potential, because there are people that struggle at high levels, and so it's we want this for our athletes, but we want it for anyone who's struggling with pain and dysfunction to know that there's not always a way out, but there's a better way. And so we want to support people in those places. And the body still says, if I can expand and effectively breathe and move, then I'll serve you, I'll give you more. But if it's a collapsing thing, everything is getting smaller, tighter, and more difficult. And so those measures that we speak about, the strength, power, flexibility, endurance, speed, balance, coordination, you can see I know that list quite well. Imagine that as the body collapses, those are the things that get less. And so if every day you're a little bit less, a little bit weaker, sometimes that's the athlete going, oh, I'm just getting a little older. No, I can tell you that your compensation patterns are getting tired. And so they're giving you less and less. And you know, there's some tough things. Like we did a Parkinson's study in end of 2019. And the definition of Parkinson's that a lot of people have is every day that you wake up and you're a little bit less. And we had to challenge that and say, are you sure? Can we not address your body and talk to it differently? And it's fascinating because what we saw happen with people was remarkable. That suddenly they had to realize that the outcome that they'd believed in their diagnosis might not be true. That actually they can not only stop, but they can reverse some of those things. And that's an amazing thing. We had an England cricketer on our study who for the last 3 years had not been able to throw a ball. And I wasn't even there for this. I missed this. I just got the video. And so with Sean, they activated him and suddenly his hips kicked in. He's got Parkinson's. And they reckoned that he threw the ball around 80 meters. 80 meters. He reckoned he'd never thrown a ball 80 meters. And if you're throwing from this, in a cricket pitch, 80 meters, it's a long way. And here's a man with Parkinson's and that ball just went. And it's like, how is that possible? Well, that means that potential was still living in his system. Think about the athlete who's giving up on their career because they can't feel it anymore. They can't find it anymore. What if you can? That's it. It's just a question. What if you can? We're not saying you definitely can, but what if? And in this work, that's what I love. The possibility and potential that lives in all of us. So how does it fit in with everybody else? What we'd like to be is we're wanting to support. So if you are in strength and conditioning or you're rehabbing someone, your goal is to strengthen and condition them at the optimal place. And so all of the things that you're already doing are important. If we can get their bodies in a better place before, during, after your training, your rehab, we would hope that together, because you don't want to be in opposition. You want to do things together where the goal is to get the athlete or the client, the patient, to a better place quicker because their body is being more effective and efficient. And again, when we look at the compensations, if I've got that ankle injury and I rehab it, I've got it down, I'm doing all my balance and proprioceptive training, and I've done all of these things, that's great. You still got to do that. But if I'm still a 3-3-3 leg, the risk profile has not changed. So I'm just, my system is literally waiting for when my ankle goes again. And so what we find is if we can get the body in a better sequence, one, the healing is quicker, the recovery is quicker, they're finding the proprioception, finding the balance and the coordination comes a lot quicker. And then the repeating of the injuries is reduced. And so the thing is that, you know, we do rehab because we want the people we're working with to get better and as soon as possible so they can return to play, return to sport. The same thing with strength and conditioning. How do we get people stronger so they can go out in the world, and if that's the athlete on the field or on the track, how do they go out and be strong and resilient, and they don't have to keep breaking and being fixed? My goal is not to spend my life fixing the same people. I want to share ideas, and we want to find answers to their problem, and so they can go out and not be stuck in those things. Because if you know, like ankle injuries, they always go, oh yeah, no, it's about every 6 months my ankle goes. Well, then we've got a patterning problem. We don't have an injury problem, we've got a patterning problem. And so working hand in hand, and you know, in my world, I'm training doctors and physios and chiropractors and osteopaths and massage therapists and sports therapists. So I think the cool thing there is that, you know, we're not in opposition. We'd like to be working with those people, because they're the ones that are going to deliver the great outcomes for everybody else. That is a very simple one. The simple answer is whatever is in the mind is in the body, and whatever is the body is in the mind. And part of what we teach is how mindset has a direct physiological impact, which means you can be feeling amazing, we can get you focusing on something that your system doesn't like, and immediately your strength, your power, it's gone. And if that happens to you in the wrong moment, in a collision, as you accelerate, as you take off on a wave in surfing, your risk of serious injury is far greater. And so we want to understand how that mindset influences our performance and our outcomes. And you know, as you saw today, in our workshop, we were lifting chairs, and I was specifically saying, let's be very clear, this chair never changes weight. And everyone's like, yes, of course, don't be silly. And then we start to play with mindset, point of focus, things for them to focus on that their systems didn't like, and suddenly the chairs were getting heavy and difficult to lift, and you go, okay, I want to remind you that chair didn't change weight. And so what's happening in your physiological system, in your physical integrity, like your safety, like your risk has just gone up. So if someone ran into you right then, you were going to get more hurt than 2 minutes before. And then we played the game of inspiration and adding inspiration, who, what, why, and then suddenly they're lifting the chairs though. It's effortless, like where did the weight go? Now that's the mind controlling the physiology, but the interesting thing is if we flip that around, if I lock your body down, if I ask you to tighten something and move, you will start to find that your mind starts to shift as well. So if I put your body into a limited state, which is what a compensation pattern does in the end, you are going to start having like a limiting vision and imagine I say, here's a problem, and I need you to find a solution for me, please. But you're only allowed to find the solution on this side of the room. And you're like, but there's a whole room over here. Oh, no. And imagine that the body locking down is doing that. So suddenly you lose options. You lose the ability to solve problems with everything available to you. And so one of the crazy things about physiology is that if I am safe, relaxed, my vision, my ability to see and experience the world is wide. And you go, yeah, of course, I'm on holiday, what a wonderful thing, that's how I'd like to be in my world, right? But when I'm stressed, when a big hungry lion wants to eat me, my entire focus goes on the big hungry lion, because to not do that would be stupid, because you can't be going, what a beautiful place, when there's a lion that wants to eat you. But the goal would be you escape you fight, flight, or freeze, you escape the big hungry lion, and then you go, and then we do that. But the problem is when we get stuck in our patterns, which is what we all seem to do, then we get stuck in this limited vision of the world. And the interesting thing is that means I see less, I hear less, I interact in the world less. And if you're an athlete, that's danger signs. You're not picking up on the cues of your environment for you to go and perform at an optimal level. And so it's almost like you only can find the solution there. But if your opponent can bring the problem to here, you're lost. And so in understanding how the mind and the body work together, we want to then, sometimes we're using the activations to unlock the mind because the body's unlocking, and sometimes there's things in the mind that changes and the body changes, and that's quite a magical thing, because we want to find that little balance, that what's the best way for you as the client right here, right now. And so sometimes it's a shift of mindset that changes the outcome. And so I do a lot of coaching, but I'm watching the physiology. So we're still using testing to see if this works. And it's funny, because if you think about if we're influencing point of focus, what's interesting is people also, the way they speak to themselves, the language they use inside their own heads. When someone talks to me, I'm listening not just to what they say, but how they say it, the kind of words they're using, because they're probably using those words to themselves too. And so the body is always listening. And so when we start to understand that stuff, we suddenly go, hey, can we maybe substitute that word? And I always like to say in my home, if something happens and it's not great and someone says, oh, it's a disaster, I'm like, okay, let's just see what a disaster really is, because a disaster is, I don't know, a big flood, a big storm that does this and all these terrible things, but somebody knocks something over. It's not a disaster, it's just an annoyance. And the languages that we use, our words make a difference to our body, because it's interpreting our environment. And so when people start to understand that and realize it's a very simple fix, it's not difficult, you can take control of your physiology, because you're just changing your words, changing your focus, and going, oh, I didn't know that's what was happening. And if you saw the room today, they're like, why am I going weak? Why is this chair getting heavy? Why is this suddenly so difficult? And if you've never considered the impact of your mind on your body, then it's not a strategy that you can use to your advantage, but it is something that somebody else could use against you. And since athletes are in the world of competition, you sure as hell don't want your opponents knowing things that you don't know, at least about you. They might know things about themselves that you don't know, but I think it's such a magical place, because it really makes a difference. Well, I think when we've seen the greatest level of success implementing this into a team is when there's an entire team buy-in. And because BeActivated isn't just a technique where you rub or a mind thing, it's a philosophy. And so it's a way of thinking and a way of being. And so probably one of the most successful setups was with one of the South African rugby teams many years ago, where first thing that I did was I did a talk for all of the coaches, all of the players, all of the medical staff, and so everyone got an introduction. Here's the philosophy, here's what it's about, here's a couple of examples to play with. Then I was doing like talks for the coaches, individual sessions with the players, talks with the strength and conditioning, talks with the physios, talks with the doctors. So they either understood what we were doing, or they were learning what we were doing so they could do it, so they didn't need me. Because the goal is not, I don't want them needing me, they must learn this. So each one, the doctor and the doctor's understanding, the physios and the massage therapists are learning it, how to implement when they need to. The strength and conditioning are using a self-activation that the players can use as part of warm-ups and part of their training. They might use it in the training room, they might use it on the field. The coaches understand the philosophy, so they're not going, what the heck are you guys doing? Because there's a philosophy around it. And even the way defensive lines in rugby, the way you think about defense and attack, if you understand what your players can do differently, then suddenly you've got a completely different way of looking at how you analyze the game. And so this particular team, it took 3 weeks to implement because there were 46 players in the camp. And I'm happy to say no South African team had won Super Rugby at that time, and that team won 3 years out of 4 from that. And what was so cool was when I spoke earlier about the fatigue side and how when you can outlast your opponents. When they did initial beep test training and they did final testing, and so it's a 3-week thing. And Basil, who was a strength and conditioning coach, came to me at the end and said, okay, that's crazy. So we've only once ever had a player above this mark. And I can't remember what the number was. And he said, we now have 13 players above that mark. And it was but what it meant was when your opponents were fatigued, you were just starting. So their systems, their capacity systems had grown to the point where they could keep running, and when they needed more, they could do more. And that's what you could actually, if you understood what you're looking for, that's what was happening on the field in every game. They were, if I am not in a fatigue state, my mental capacity also stays sharp. So I'm not going to lose the opportunities that are available because I'm tired. And for me, that's how I see all of these things. And I often spend time wondering why this isn't just what everyone sees, but that's why I spend my life teaching this and sharing this. And but the whole thing about a team is if we can get everyone, they don't all have to do it, but they have to understand what's being done is slightly different, it's a different way of thinking. But if we can do that and all go in the same direction, then the success is almost inevitable. I was sitting in the airport in a little coffee shop and I was so relaxed. I was saying to my wife, this is actually very interesting. Like I've had a pretty hardcore week and with wonderful people in the Scandinavian countries, wonderful. But I'm sitting in an airport and I'm going, I'm so relaxed. And there was something about just arriving and feeling that, and I love that. And there's something in the culture. I can't even say the culture because the space, the people, that I just feel completely relaxed. And maybe because I'm from the other end of Africa, in South Africa, that it just feels like home. But it's felt wonderful, and the people that we've had on the workshop, and they were, they were great. And I think one of the things that traveling the world that is very interesting is respect is such a wonderful thing in a learning space. When you're in a room where people are respectful of each other, I'm respectful of them, they're respectful of me, and you can feel it, and it allows us to teach at slightly different level. And even though we had the translator in the booth into microphones or into headphones for people, there was that sense of we're learning together, and I really enjoyed that, and so it's been fantastic actually. And so tonight I hope that I'm going to go out and see a little bit more of Morocco.